In the first part of section 62, we will look at trigonometric equations. The use of the calculator is not allowed on this section. We will be looking at the unit circle from and including 0 up until 2 pi. So for question number 1, if you're given that the sine of x is equal to negative root 2 over 2, we want to start by thinking about, well, where does that root 2 over 2 come from? So in an ordered pair, if the sine was root 2 over 2, the only denominator that could be associated with would be a denominator of 4. So that's really going to tell me that my denominators are going to be 4. Then I need to think about, well, where would the sine value end up being negative? Well, in the first quadrant, it would not be negative. The sine would also not be negative in the second quadrant. It would be negative in both the third and the fourth quadrants. So because it would be negative in the third and fourth quadrants, we know that they're going to fall there. And if the denominators are 4, then in the third quadrant, that makes the numerator 5 pi over 4. And in the fourth quadrant, the numerator would have to be 7 pi and then over 4. For number 2, again, you want to think about that ordered pair. If your cosine value is 1/2, think about what your denominator might be. Now, once we can recognize that our denominator there would have to be 3, then we want to think, well, where is the cosine positive? Well, the cosine is going to be positive in the first quadrant and also in the fourth quadrant. So if our denominator is 3 and it's in the first quadrant, our numerator is pi. And if it's in the fourth quadrant, it's 1 less than twice, so that's going to be 5 pi over 3. So I'd like you to pause the video now and see if you can come up with the answers for 3 and 4, and then replay and check your answers. Now on number 3, the tangent is root 3. So you want to remember the rules that we talked about previously. If you see that root 3 and it's associated with a tangent, the denominator is going to have to be 3. Next, I want to think, well, where is the tangent going to be positive? And that's in the first and the third quadrants. So in the first quadrant, that'll end up being pi over 3. And in the third quadrant, that's going to be 4 pi over 3. And those would be my answers. For number 4, secant goes with cosine. So if the secant is negative 2 root 3 over 3, that means that the cosine is going to be negative root 3 over 2. So for an ordered pair to start with root 3 over 2, the denominator is going to have to be 6. For cosine to be negative, it's going to either be in quadrant 2 or quadrant 3. From there, if my denominator is 6 and it's in the second quadrant, that's going to be a numerator that's 1 less than the denominator, so 5 pi over 6. And then if we're in the third, the numerator is 1 bigger, and that's going to be 7 pi over 6. Again, pause the video and try 5 and 6 on your own, and then play the video to check your answers. Now for number 5, negative 1 as a cosine value is going to put us at negative 1 comma 0, which means we're going to fall on the x-axis. And that value that we're going to be thinking about at negative 1 comma 0 is just pi. And so this one only has one answer. There's not going to be 2 options for this one. For 6, if the cosecant is 2, remember that cosecant goes with sine. So if the cosecant is 2, the sine would have been 1/2. That means in the ordered pair, I would put the 1/2 in the second position. That then means that the x value there is root 3 over 2, which makes the denominator going to be 6. And then we're thinking, well, where is the sign positive? It's positive in the top half of the unit circle in quadrants 1 and 2. So again, if our denominator is 6, in the first quadrant, that would make it pi over 6, and in the second quadrant, we would be looking at 5 pi over 6. Now, when we get to number 7, it looks a little different. There's some things that we need to adjust here. We want to solve this for cosine of x. In order to do that, we're going to start by adding root 3 over to each side. And now we're left with 2 cosine of x is equal to root 3. Then we need to get rid of that 2, so we divide both sides by 2, and we end up getting that the cosine of x is equal to root 3 over 2. See if you can answer the question from there. Pause the video and replay when you're finished. So if the cosine value is positive, that is going to put us in the first and the fourth quadrants. From there, if our cosine value is root 3 over 2, our denominator is going to be 6. In the first quadrant, that's going to make that pi over 6, and in the fourth quadrant, we'll be looking at 11 pi over 6. Now pause the video and try number 8. You'll have to simplify it just like we did in number 7, find the quadrants and find the answers. So here we start by subtracting root 2, then dividing by 2, and we're looking at a cosine value that's equal to negative root 2 over 2. So first of all, I'm thinking about my denominator. My denominator is going to have to be 4 here. From there, I want to think, well, where is the cosine negative? It's negative on the left side of the unit circle, which is going to put us in quadrants 2 and 3. So if our denominator is 4 and we're in the second quadrant, that gives us a value of 3 pi over 4. And our other value in the third quadrant is going to be 5 pi over 4. There's 3 problems left. Again, I'd like you to pause the video, try the 3 problems. You'll have to simplify each expression first, and then play through the answers once you have answered these questions. For number 9, we start by subtracting 1 and then dividing by 2. So I'm looking at a sign value that's equal to negative 1/2. So if my second value is 1/2, my first value was root 3 over 2, which means that my denominator here is going to be 6. From there, for the quadrants, sign is going to be negative in our bottom half of the unit circle in quadrants 3 and 4. And again, if our denominator is 6, quadrant 3, that gives me 7 pi over 6, and quadrant 4 will give me 11 pi over 6. For 10, we're going to start by subtracting 2, and that's all we need to do to simplify that. Now, if the secant is equal to negative 2, that means that the cosine would be negative 1/2. For an ordered pair to start with negative 1/2, that means its denominator was going to be 3. For the cosine to be negative, it's going to put us on the left side of the unit circle, which is quadrants 2 and 3. From there, if our denominator is 3, the second quadrant would be 2 pi over 3. The third quadrant is then going to be 4 pi over 3. For 11, when we solve for tangent of x, we're going to start by subtracting 1, then dividing by root 3, and then we would have to rationalize that. So if my tangent is equal to negative root 3 over 3, we want to immediately recognize that that means our denominator is going to be 6. From there, quadrants, if the tangent is negative, it's going to be in the second or the fourth quadrant. And then for our answers, if we've said that the denominator is going to be 6, the second quadrant would be 5 pi over 6, and the fourth quadrant value would be 11 pi over 6. So for homework, please complete the associated problems with this lesson.